The lobby was buzzing with activity. The clatter of luggage wheels across the polished floor, the faint hum of voices, and the occasional phone ringing blended into a low, constant murmur. Stephen stepped up to the front desk, calm and composed, expecting a quick check-in. Minutes passed, then tens of minutes, and still nothing. The manager's distracted fingers danced across the keyboard, eyes never leaving the screen. Each second stretched longer, the waiting room growing heavier with tension. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some glancing at the clock, others exchanging puzzled whispers. "Isn't that?" one guest murmured. "Why hasn't he been helped yet?" another whispered. The subtle energy in the room changed, a mixture of curiosity and disbelief settling over everyone. People began noticing the contrast. A well-known guest, patient and unshaken, versus a manager who seemed indifferent to the situation. The minutes dragged on, and the air thickened with anticipation. Even the regular hotel staff felt it, a quiet pressure, almost tangible, pressing down on every corner of the lobby. Stephen leaned slightly against the counter, still calm, still patient, and still commanding attention without saying a word. The room seemed to shrink around the tension, everyone watching, waiting for the first sign of action. Would the manager finally act, or would the silence stretch even longer, testing everyone's patience? Have you ever been kept waiting so long at a hotel that you started questioning everything? As the minutes ticked by, it became clear that Stephen wasn't just waiting. He was making a statement without a word. The hotel manager, preoccupied and perhaps thinking it was just another celebrity with an attitude, glanced up occasionally, showing no real urgency. Guests began to murmur among themselves. Some assumed this was a minor delay, a simple mistake. Others whispered about the audacity. Who does he think he is? Failing to realize that patience itself could be a kind of power. Stephen sat quietly, eyes scanning the lobby, calm, composed, seemingly unaffected by the growing frustration. The contrast was striking. The manager's hurried gestures and flustered demeanor made him appear small and reactive. In comparison, Stephen's stillness, his measured breaths, and his quiet presence made him seem in complete control of the situation, even though he hadn't said a single word. People began noticing details they hadn't before. The slight furrow in the manager's brow, the way he shuffled papers nervously, the subtle tension in his posture. Stephen's calm was almost magnetic, drawing attention without demanding it. What started as a simple check-in had now become a silent contest of composure versus chaos. Guests exchanged glances, some with surprise, others with admiration. They had underestimated the man waiting so patiently, assuming he would lose his cool or create a scene. But there was no anger, no impatience, only a quiet assertion that his time mattered, and that subtlety could speak louder than any words. The manager finally looked up fully, eyes meeting Stephen's, and for the first time, hesitation flickered across his face. The room held its breath. It was a lesson in perception, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that the quiet ones often hold the most power. Have you ever underestimated someone just because they were quiet and patient? Time continued to stretch, each passing minute heavier than the last. The lobby, once just a space for people coming and going, now felt like a stage. Every footstep, every cough, every soft shuffle of papers amplified the anticipation. Stephen's calm presence was a stark contrast to the growing unease around him. The manager's attempts to multitask became increasingly obvious, checking screens, tapping keys, making half-hearted attempts at customer greetings. But nothing resolved the delay. Each pause, each moment of indecision, only intensified the pressure. The staff exchanged nervous glances, aware that this wasn't just a minor hiccup. It had become a spectacle. Guests began leaning forward, curiosity piqued, wondering what would happen next. The tension wasn't just about waiting. It was about the clash of expectations. On one side, the manager, believing he could maintain control. On the other, a guest whose quiet authority was reshaping the atmosphere. Every glance, Every subtle shift of posture communicated more than words ever could. Stephen's patience began to feel like a silent challenge. It was as if time itself was bending to test the manager, each second passing, a reminder that mistakes in judgment carry weight. The receptionist fidgeted. The bell at the front desk jingled as a nervous guest passed by, and yet Stephen remained unshaken, his calm gaze scanning the room, observing, waiting. A faint murmur arose among the guests, soft yet noticeable. The undercurrent of tension spread like electricity, subtle but undeniable. People were drawn into it, sensing that something significant was unfolding, even if they couldn't put it into words. The longer the delay continued, the more the manager's authority seemed to waver, and the more attention centered on Stephen. The energy in the room shifted from casual annoyance to something heavier: anticipation, curiosity, and even admiration. Every gesture, every breath, amplified the stakes. What started as a routine hotel check-in had transformed into a silent test of patience, composure, and control. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's calm made the whole room tense? The clock's hands seemed heavier now, each tick echoing through the quiet lobby. Guests shuffled in their seats, whispering, eyes flicking toward the front desk. The manager's attempts at explanations grew more frantic, his words clipped and uneven, betraying the mounting stress he couldn't hide. Stephen had been patient, almost unnervingly so. His gaze remained steady, focused on the manager, as if silently asking, "How long is too long?" But the calm was deceptive. It carried weight. Every guest who glanced at him felt it. A quiet authority that demanded respect without a single raised voice. Finally, the manager's composure cracked. I'm very sorry, sir," he stammered, glancing at papers, then at the clock, then at Stephen. The apology sounded hollow even to him. It was too late for mere words. The tension had built to a breaking point. Stephen leaned forward slightly, a subtle movement that shifted the room. The atmosphere thickened, charged with anticipation. Staff and guests alike sensed the moment. This wasn't just a delay anymore. It was a test of patience, of respect, and of authority. The manager swallowed hard, aware that the quiet man before him had already won the moral battle. The lobby was silent, but alive with unspoken questions. Everyone waited to see how the confrontation would resolve itself. Stephen didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture dramatically. He simply leaned back, eyes fixed calmly on the manager, the kind of steady, unshakable presence that made the other man fumble for words. The manager's frustration boiled over. He waved at the receptionist, muttering, "Handle it." His attempts to regain control only heightened the tension. Stephen's measured patience highlighted the contrast: authority without aggression versus authority under pressure. The silent standoff stretched, each moment magnifying the stakes, until the manager finally met Stephen's gaze and realized that this wasn't just about a check-in. It was a lesson in composure, in respect, in the quiet power of someone who refused to be rushed, ignored, or dismissed. The guests felt it, the staff felt it, even the manager could feel it, the calm before a storm that didn't need words. What would you have done if you were in Stephen's shoes, waiting that long? The manager finally moved, offering a seat with a hesitant hand, his earlier bluster replaced by cautious deference. Stephen nodded ever so slightly, accepting the gesture, but the unspoken truth lingered in the air. Patience, quiet authority, and dignity could speak louder than anger or frustration ever could. Guests exhaled collectively, a subtle release after the tension that had held the room captive. The moment had passed, but the impression it left would linger, a reminder that true control is shown through calm decisiveness, not frantic effort. The tension hung heavy in the lobby like fog, but finally, action was taken. Stephen didn't shout. He didn't demand attention. He simply rose, every movement calm, deliberate, carrying a weight that made the manager flinch. A few staff members glanced at each other, unsure whether to step in or let the situation unfold naturally. Stephen approached the front desk slowly, eyes never leaving the manager, the silence thick and expectant. He didn't raise his voice, yet the presence alone made the room shift. The manager, realizing that words alone weren't going to resolve this, scrambled to find the proper forms, double-checking reservations and fumbling with keys. The urgency in his movements contrasted sharply with Stephen's composed patience. Every action he took seemed to underline one simple fact. This man would not be rushed, intimidated, or ignored. Stephen gestured toward the keys without a word, and the manager hurried, finally handing over the proper key with trembling hands. The gesture was small, yet it carried the weight of recognition. The acknowledgement that patience and calm authority could command respect more effectively than anger or threats ever could. Guests watched silently, the tension slowly giving way to relief. Some whispered among themselves, unable to hide their surprise at how quietly but decisively the situation had been resolved. Staff members exhaled collectively, their nerves finally settling, grateful that the standoff hadn't escalated further. Then came the subtle shift. Stephen took the key, nodded politely, and moved toward the elevator, his movements smooth and controlled. The manager watched him go, a mixture of relief and embarrassment on his face. He realized, quietly, that no apology could undo the lesson Stephen had demonstrated. Patience, calm composure, and the quiet enforcement of respect were more powerful than any raised voice or frantic gesture. The other guests murmured among themselves, amazed at how an ordinary situation had transformed into a display of composure under pressure. No one had shouted, no one had panicked, and yet the lesson was unmistakable. Even in moments of frustration or delay, a calm, deliberate approach could achieve what frantic effort could not. Staff quietly cleared the area, resetting the lobby, but the atmosphere remained charged, the air still holding the memory of the confrontation. Stephen's calm decisiveness had left an impression, one that would linger in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Some guests exchanged glances, whispering questions. Would they have stayed as calm? Would they have handled it as gracefully? The curiosity hung like an unspoken thread in the room. As Stephen moved toward his room, the manager followed, finally finding his own composure. He stepped aside, offering the briefest nod of acknowledgement. The tension dissolved, replaced by the quiet hum of resumed activity. But the lesson remained. Action taken with calm authority resonates far deeper than words alone. Have you ever had to take control of a frustrating situation like this? And how did you handle it? By the time Stephen entered his room, the hotel had regained its rhythm. But the memory of the confrontation, the patience, the composure, the quiet authority, had already spread through whispers among staff and guests alike. It was a demonstration that sometimes the most powerful action isn't loud or aggressive. It's measured, deliberate, and resolute. The hotel lobby slowly returned to its usual rhythm, yet the impact of the encounter lingered in the air. Staff exchanged quiet glances, their earlier nerves replaced by a mix of awe and relief. The manager, still pale and slightly shaken, reflected on how differently the situation could have unfolded had patience not been exercised. Stephen sat in his room, door closed, taking a moment to breathe. The hours of waiting, the tension, the frustration, they had all been met with calm determination rather than aggression. In that quiet, he understood something simple but profound. Sometimes, restraint speaks louder than words, and measured action carries more weight than any outburst. Guests who had witnessed the events lingered in conversation, replaying the encounter in their minds. They discussed what they had seen, the contrast between panic and composure, impatience and deliberate control. It was clear that a single, calm presence had changed the dynamic entirely, shifting the room from chaos to order without raising a voice. Do you think staying calm is more effective than getting angry in situations like this? Even the manager, who had spent hours flustered behind the desk, now recognized the lesson. Anger and frustration might feel immediate, but they rarely resolve challenges. Patience, composure, and steady confidence, Those were the tools that ultimately restored respect and order. The story of the evening quietly settled into the memories of everyone present. It wasn't just about being kept waiting or a confrontation resolved. It was a reminder of the power of self-control, the value of maintaining composure, and the unexpected strength found in calm decisiveness. By the time the hotel resumed its normal pace, the lesson was already clear. In moments of tension, staying calm isn't just effective, it can transform the situation entirely. As the night drew to a close, the hotel settled into an unusual calm. The events of earlier replayed quietly in the minds of those who had been there, a moment where tension could have spiraled, yet didn't. It wasn't about authority, it wasn't about force, and it certainly wasn't about anger. It was about control, presence, and timing. Stephen's calm approach had turned a potentially volatile situation into a lesson in composure. Every frustrated glance, every impatient tap of a foot had been met with steady patience, reminding everyone that power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet choices that carry the most impact. Have you ever witnessed someone completely change a tense situation just by staying composed? Moments like this leave an impression that goes beyond a single encounter. They teach that frustration rarely solves problems, and that patience and calm decisiveness can shift dynamics faster than any confrontation ever could. The lesson is simple yet powerful. Composure isn't weakness, it's strategy, and it can transform the way people respond, even in the most heated moments. As the lights dimmed and the hotel returned to its usual rhythm, that lesson lingered, reminding everyone that real strength often shows in silence, not in chaos.